It was a humid Friday afternoon when I saw the text from my sister pop up on my phone, the kind of sunlight that seeps heavily through the leaves, wrapping everything in a luminous green haze. "Can we talk about the baby shower?" It read, and even before I opened it, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Family gatherings usually put me on edge, but this one stung particularly because of my niece, Haley, who was just beginning to step into this whirlwind of adulthood and motherhood, a young woman at 22 with barely a grasp on her own dreams, let alone the burdens of parenting. My sister had always held on tightly to the idea that families should rally together for every celebration, but I wasn't about to jump into the fire this time. With 3 kids and a full-time job that drained every ounce of energy I had, I couldn't afford to take on anything else, especially something as elaborate as a baby shower. The weight of my sister's expectations loomed heavy, and yet it felt unjust, like I was the antagonist in a story I didn't agree to be part of. When I met her for coffee the next day, the savoriness of the espresso barely touched my tongue as her melancholy but hopeful gaze settled on me. "I was hoping you'd consider hosting the shower at your place," she said, almost too lightly, but I could hear the urgency beneath her words. The cafe buzzed around us, laughter and chatter filling the air, and I could almost drown in it, wishing for the world to swallow me whole rather than face this conversation. "I just think it would mean a lot to Haley if we did something nice," she continued, and there it was, the guilt trip launchpad. My mind raced as I tried to visualize it, balloons in my small living room, a sea of pastel decor clashing with my casual aesthetic, and then there was the idea of Haley's friends showing up, all bubbly and full of youthful energy, while I sat, the bored executioner of this so-called celebratory event. "I just don't think I can handle it," I finally uttered, my voice almost quiet against the ruckus around us. Her eyebrows knitted together, a sign of disappointment that cut deeper than I'd anticipated. "But I thought we were in this together," she replied, hurt seeping through her words like water through a cracked dam. I felt a pang of guilt and uncertainty twist in my stomach, and for a moment, I wondered if maybe I was being selfish for wanting to protect my own peace. I wished I could take it back, but my loyalty to my own limits pushed me to stand my ground. We ended the conversation with an awkward hug, and as I drove home, a cloud of tension settled over my thoughts, swirling wildly as I deliberated my feelings. Shouldn't I have felt obligated to help my sister? My heart tugged at the part of me that wanted to be a good aunt, while my head screamed for self-preservation. Days turned into a week, and I found myself dodging family messages, pretending to be busy and overwhelmed while grappling with the disappointment I had left in my sister's eyes. Haley, oblivious to our frayed threads, posted on social media about the struggles of pregnancy, her joy mixed with worries, and I felt the weight of my own decisions pressing heavier against my chest. It was then that I noticed a photo of her clutching a tiny pair of baby shoes, her glowing smile juxtaposed against a backdrop that flourished with love and excitement from her friends. My heart sank a little lower. Maybe I'd misjudged the situation. Perhaps my presence at the shower was more significant than I'd thought, a file within a larger family moment that would eventually fade into nostalgia for Haley. A few days later, I reached out to my sister, my fingers hesitating over the screen, not sure what to say. "I'm sorry for shutting you out. How about we do something simple? Like, a small get-together at your house?" The reply came almost instantly, her joy a visible burst through the digital barrier. "I'd love that. We can make it work." Having said yes to a smaller version of the event felt like a burden lifted, the knot in my chest loosening a fraction, but I was still met with trepidation about the whole ordeal. As the day approached, I helped my sister prepare rather than overstretch myself, creating an intimate environment that felt fitting for the occasion, welcoming just a handful of people. The atmosphere shifted, the gathering was infused with laughter and light conversation, a gentle pace that allowed us to relish in small moments. When I finally embraced Haley, her eyes shining as she expressed her gratitude, something softened within me. It wasn't about the big lavish events or the effort that one apparently had to offer. Instead, it was about the connections we fostered amid chaos, the memories formed beneath the laughter and subtle glances. I left the shower that evening feeling lighter, having found joy in the simplicity of family bonding, realizing I wasn't the antagonist I had assumed. As life continues to unfold, I wonder about the many roles we play and the weight of our choices, ultimately discovering that sometimes, being present is the greatest gift we can offer. Update: a couple of months after the shower, I received a text from Haley. "You were the best aunt. I'll need you by my side when the baby arrives." True to the nature of life, my anxieties began to bubble beneath my skin again. I could feel the knot forming once more. However, this time, there was a different spark of excitement laced through the worries. Perhaps my growth lay not just in learning about hosting, perhaps, It was also about embracing the beautiful chaos ahead of us as a family, and that in itself felt like offering a profound love, even if chaos threatened to overtake it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and adjustments. I found myself caught somewhere between the anticipation of Haley's arrival and the heavy weight of my self-doubt. Each time I picked up my phone to message her, I hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen as I replayed our past interactions in my mind. What would she think if I voiced my fears? What if my honesty discouraged her? It was a strange dance I found myself doing, where I wanted to be supportive but feared I might come off as inadequate, as if my very presence might overshadow her joy. Every time I thought about the baby shower, the knot in my stomach tightened just a bit more. I'd spent hours Googling cute party themes and sculpting perfect Pinterest boards, wanting to give Haley the celebration she deserved, but a part of me still flinched at the thought of it. Despite the excitement in her texts, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping on shaky ground, teetering between wanting to be the best I could be and worrying I might inadvertently ruin the day. One Saturday morning, after a particularly vivid dream about not showing up at her shower and Haley's disappointed face haunting me throughout the day, I decided to dive headfirst into planning mode. I rummaged through my stash of decorations tucked away in the attic, retrieving boxes of fairy lights, streamers, and balloons, remnants from a happier time when I had hosted parties more carefree. Dust motes floated in the sunlight filtering through the windows, and I took a moment to breathe in the nostalgia, memories of laughter and laughter-filled nights swirling around me. That was the turning point. I began combing through local shops for unique baby gifts, thinking of Haley's style and colors she loved. Each item I picked up felt like an offering of love, a piece of my heart wrapped up in careful thought. I surprised myself with how enjoyable the process became, my anxieties dissipating into a soft acceptance of the love we were all bound to share. The chaotic beauty of family seemed a little less overwhelming, and I started to understand that chaos isn't always destructive. Sometimes, it's what binds and strengthens our connections. The day of the shower arrived with sunlight draping the living room in golden warmth. Family and friends crowded in, filling the space with laughter and the sweet scent of baked goods. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. As Haley walked in, her glow eclipsing everything else, I couldn't help but smile. She looked radiant, and her happiness became infectious, pulling me from my anxious shell. We embraced tightly, and I whispered, "Let's just have fun." As the shower progressed, I busied myself ensuring everyone was enjoying themselves, but I kept a close eye on Haley. No longer did I feel like an imposter in the role of an aunt. Instead, I embraced every hug, every laugh shared among us. When Haley opened her gifts, her eyes sparkled brighter than I had ever seen. I watched her exude awe with each present, her gratitude pouring out as she shared stories with each person who had contributed to her journey into motherhood. That connection, that emotional exchange, was the heart of the chaos, the undercurrent that nurtured each moment we spent together. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of purple and gold, I felt a content sigh escape my lips. I had not only helped organize a memorable day, I had also rekindled my sense of belonging within the family, reconnecting me with an identity I had almost neglected. Haley caught my gaze and, with a beaming smile, whispered, "Thank you for everything." In that moment, all my previous doubts seemed to evaporate, replaced by the warmth of our bond. In the weeks that followed Haley's shower, I embraced our family's evolving dynamics. I found joy in little things, like evening phone calls filled with baby name brainstorming and sharing in her cravings. Each conversation brought me closer to that little being who hadn't even arrived yet but already held such a special place in our hearts. As Haley eventually entered motherhood, the beautiful chaos I had once feared became a familiar dance of endless affection and unexpected moments. I wasn't just her aunt anymore, I was an active participant in her life and her child's, relishing the highs and comforting her through the lows. One evening, a few months after the shower, I laid in bed reflecting on my journey, tapping my fingers gently against my pillow. The knot that had once felt so constrictive was now just a gentle reminder of my growth. Perhaps being an aunt wasn't about perfection but about presence, sharing laughter, standing in support, and never shying away from the beautifully tangled web that is family. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I left behind all doubts, embracing an open heart for whatever lovely chaos would come next, welcoming the new chapters that awaited us all. As the weeks rolled on, I found myself swept up in a rhythm, one that intertwined the mundane with the miraculous, the simple moments with the monumental milestones of Haley's pregnancy. I remember a particular afternoon when I stopped by her place to drop off some groceries. The spring sun poured in through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over everything, and I was immediately struck by how vibrant she looked. Her pregnancy was sculpting her, transforming her into an even more radiant version of the girl I once watched dream of starting her own family. We sat at her small, round table over steaming cups of herbal tea, each sip grounding me more into this new, familial role I was learning to embrace. With every chat we shared, small ripples of vulnerability merged with laughter, weaving an intricate tapestry of connection that brought us even closer. Haley, with her wide, expressive eyes, would recount her fears about motherhood, the worry lines settling more frequently on her brow as her due date approached. I listened intently, nodding in recognition of the depth of her feelings, echoing my own reflections of inadequacy that had bubbled over. During the shower planning, it made me realize how much our experiences, though different, had a common thread woven by love, expectations, and a hint of self-doubt. One particularly rainy evening, as I scrolled through social media, I came across a post from my sister announcing that they had decided to throw a welcome home party for little Charlie, Haley's baby. The planning began shortly after, turning into a flurry of messages and ideas bouncing back and forth among our family group chat. It struck me then how exhilarating it was to actually be involved, to step out of my old self-doubt and dive into this new role of active participant in our shared family rituals. I volunteered to handle decorations, recalling my knack for arranging flowers and crafting small centerpieces that felt meaningful. The excitement of collaboration sparkled in our exchanges, and for the first time, I felt a sense of belonging in the chaos. As the day of the party approached, I became wrapped up in a flurry of creativity. I remember waking up at dawn, with birds chirping outside my window, my mind already racing with ideas. I gathered twinkling fairy lights, soft pastels of streamers, and, of course, a small burst of blooms that I'd hand-picked from a nearby farmer's market. The actual day finally arrived, filled with laughter, chatter, and the lure of sweet baby scents wafting through the air. I could feel an unmistakable blend of joy and vulnerability wrapping the room in warmth. Right before the guests arrived, I caught a moment with Haley in the dimness of the dimly lit hall. We stood shoulder to shoulder, glancing at the spread we had prepared, a cozy blend of homemade pies, cupcakes, and her favorite herbal-infused punch. "I can't believe how much we've grown," she said, her voice a mixture of joy and sincere disbelief. I remembered the girl who had texted me that I was the best aunt and smiled, thinking about how far we'd come together. As laughter echoed around us, I embraced that knot of emotion in my chest, now a soft reminder of the love that had filled the air between us. At one point during the gathering, I noticed different family members darting around the room, sharing their own stories and discussing the joys and challenges of parenthood. I felt the warmth of connection radiating among us, reminding me that family existed not in the absence of messiness, but rather in the harmonious blend of our differences. This newfound understanding washed over me like a soothing balm. I was now a part of something larger, a precious mosaic pieced together by shared experiences, even the imperfect ones. And when Haley, with her beaming smile and tired, yet blissful eyes, looked at me and mouthed a silent "thank you" across the room, I knew in that moment that I had found my place. I allowed myself to bask in the joy of the moment, letting the worries of my old self flicker away like the glowing lights strung above us. There would always be more showers, birthdays, and quiet moments of chaos to share. As I departed that evening, with the scent of baby powder lingering in the air and the laughter of my family still echoing in my ears, I carried with me the knowledge that my role was simply to be there, present and loving, no matter the circumstances. Life, with its beautiful chaos, awaited us all, and I was finally ready to embrace each chapter that lay ahead. The sun was dipping below the horizon as I sat on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands and the gentle rustle of leaves filling the quiet air. It was one of those evenings when the world felt still, a perfect backdrop for the thoughts swirling in my mind about my sister, Kathy, and her unusual fixation on her new child. She had been so ecstatic when she announced her pregnancy, and even now, weeks after little Milo's birth, the whole family was under the spell of this newborn. Everyone, it seemed, except me. As I sipped my tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not with Milo, but with the way Kathy was treating him. The moment I stepped into her house for the first time post-delivery, I was hit with a wave of bizarrely exaggerated decor dedicated to him. Photos plastered across the walls, his name in neon lights above a crib that seemed more like a museum piece than a place for sleeping. It felt less like celebrating a life and more like a personal art installation from Kathy that demanded to reclaim the attention she had always been dependent on. I could recall something each time I visited, the wild comments rolling off her tongue, like how she believed Milo was destined for greatness, as if he were already writing the next great American novel from his crib. Wincing at such pressure woven into a life that was only just beginning, I wondered if anyone else saw the disconnection behind her infatuation. It all came to a head during this one family gathering. The air was thick with a mix of laughter and baby cooing when it slipped out, an offhand remark from me in a moment of terrible impatience. I had meant it lightly, but the words spiraled beyond my control. "Kathy, I know you love him, but I don't think a plastic doll counts as a real baby." Her face had drained of color, and the entire room went silent, eyes darting back and forth between us. I could hardly breathe, the shocking realization of what I had said crashing over me like a wave, and suddenly I was the villain in everyone's tale. Kathy's hands trembled as she held Milo close to her, a line of protectiveness flaring to life. I watched her posture close in, her expression blackening like a storm cloud. "What do you mean, a doll? He's my baby," she retorted, her voice sharp yet fragile, as if the words were made of glass. I stammered a half-hearted apology, fumbling with my thoughts in the face of her hurt. Part of me felt guilty for not taking her obsession seriously, but another part boiled with frustration. I loved her, and I wanted her to step back from this illusion, this almost delusional state she had created around motherhood, a base trust built on the genuine nurturing that true parenting demanded. Over the next couple of weeks, my life became a tangle of texts from family members asking if I was okay, trying to convince me to apologize profusely, or shaming me for my insensitive comment. Meanwhile, Kathy retreated into herself, avoiding me during family dinners, which just made the entire situation more awkward. I couldn't help but feel a swell of loneliness, like a haze settling over me. I kept fixing our broken relationship in my mind, pondering how I could ease her back to reality without jeopardizing our bond. Finally, in a moment of clarity amidst the fog of my anxieties, I sat down with a pen and paper. I wrote Kathy a letter, pouring out my heart in the way I couldn't face her directly. I told her I saw the mother in her, the love she poured into her baby, but that I worried she was losing the chance to be present in Milo's life by creating a world that felt unreal. A few days later, she responded. The letter was heartfelt, thick with emotion, but she'd woven in threads of defensiveness, describing how she felt so much pressure as a new mother to get everything right. I understood then that she wasn't just immersed in an illusion for my sake but for herself, a desperate attempt to claim identity in a role that felt immense and overwhelming. We met afterward at the park, the crisp air bringing fresh hope as I walked alongside her, both of us with our insecurities and tenderness laid bare. I promised to support her, to be there through the chaos and sleepless nights, and as we laughed at the ridiculousness of plastic dolls in the middle of our shared parental journey, I felt the aching distance begin to disappear, with the first baby steps toward reconciliation. "So, was I the asshole?" I asked her gently, needing to know if I had crossed a line too far. She shook her head, her lips curling upwards into a soft smile. "No, just a blunt sister who cares too much." In that moment, the weight I had carried began to lift, crafting an opening through which trust and love could flow again. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, real and raw, ready to navigate this strange world of parenting together, one imperfect step at a time. A few months later, reflecting on that night, I found that Kathy had truly embraced the chaotic journey of motherhood. She had filled her home with memories instead of just decorations, and I often caught glimpses of her laughing at some mess Milo had made, remembering how quickly life can be both beautiful and exhausting. It was a reminder of the deeper roots of connection, real or metaphorical, the bond that continued to thrive despite the heated moments, rendering the word asshole a distant afterthought on our shared journey of love. As I settled into bed that evening, I took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of family and the nature of recovery to weave into my dreams, knowing that the true beauty of life lies in our imperfections. The next few days passed in a gentle blur, each moment blending into another like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. My thoughts danced between the sweet laughter of my niece and the shadows of that sharp confrontation with my sister. Sipping coffee in my small kitchen, I let my mind wander as I watched the rain streak against the window, imagining the little milestones I expected Milo to reach. And then, as if the universe cottoned to my neglect and acknowledging the unresolved feelings swirling inside me, my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from Claire, one of those whimsical updates she loved to send, featuring a video of Milo clutching at a stuffed giraffe while gurgling pleasantly. Despite the swirling conflict that had weighed on my heart, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, his innocent joy begging for love and attention. As the days rolled on, I found myself reflecting deeply about what had transpired between my sister and me. It wasn't just her intense love for Milo that prompted the conflict, it was my own feelings of disconnection and discomfort. I hadn't held a baby in years. I had no framework to understand my sister's adoration, which often felt overwhelming in its intensity. Is that why I reacted so harshly? I mused, tracing the lines of the wooden table with my fingers. It was a lesson in empathy, one that demanded from me an exploration beyond the tangible, into the depths of reason and emotion. Face to face with my own vulnerabilities, I understood that I had played the role of the contrarian, perhaps attempting to temper her unyielding praise with my rational skepticism, but in doing so, I had dismissed a fundamental part of her motherhood. Later that week, I decided it was time to extend the olive branch, realizing that this misunderstanding could easily fracture our close-knit bond if left unaddressed. I invited her for a coffee in a cozy cafe perched on the corner of our neighborhood, a spot that held joyful memories of laughter and sisterly connection. As I took a seat at the small round table, my heart fluttered with a mix of remorse and courage. Claire arrived shortly thereafter, her expression betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Hey," she greeted, her eyes darting before settling on mine. A moment hung heavily between us, as if time itself was hesitating to take the next step. "Hey," I replied, motioning for her to sit. "I wanted to talk, to clear the air." She nodded, her fingers wrapping nervously around her coffee cup. The barista delivered our drinks, breaking the tension momentarily with the scent of fresh espresso and the quiet hum of cups clinking. "I feel like I hurt you when I said that thing about Milo," I began, my voice softer than anticipated as I approached the crux of our dilemma. "I shouldn't have dismissed your love for him. It's real and powerful, and it's something to be celebrated, not questioned." Her brow furrowed in contemplation. "It's just, sometimes, I feel like people don't understand," she finally admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They think because I have a different experience of motherhood, or maybe because I'm a little overprotective, it makes me less valid. I don't want you to see him like that." The air around us lightened. And I felt the walls we had built slowly begin to crumble. My heart ached for the love we shared, but also for the walls we had built in moments of misunderstanding. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Claire. I've been struggling to connect with that part of your life. I just didn't expect the reaction I had," I confessed, a tremor within the lines of my voice. It was almost cathartic to admit that I had been caught off guard by the power of her maternal instinct, and in that breath of honesty, a subtle understanding bloomed between us. She nodded, her once tense posture softening with each word exchanged. As we continued to talk, honesty ricocheting between our hearts, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. Sharing our fears, our insecurities as sisters navigated in different realms of life, allowed us to embrace the authenticity of our experience. The conversation drifted toward lighter topics, both of us eventually finding bits of laughter woven back into our dialogue. And right before we parted, Claire leaned over and took my hands in hers, her laughter rolling like waves echoing the warmth we had built back. "Let's schedule a weekend together at my place? I'd love for you to spend time with Milo. I think he'll really enjoy getting to know his amazing aunt." When I returned home, the weight of conflict lifted significantly. I realized I had so much to learn, yet it was wonderful to resonate with the ongoing journey toward understanding. Through my sister's eyes, through her simplest joys, I could find connections twinkling in the small moments, an invitation to a new life cradled not just in love but also in the vulnerability of letting go of what I thought and embracing the reality of what truly is. Some days are beautiful messes, and I knew I had a part to play in coloring those experiences with her, as sisters and as a family. Over the following weeks, I remained intertwined with Claire and Milo's lives more intimately, engaging in every one of their innocent moments with increasing excitement. Eventually, as I lay down each night, I allowed myself moments to reflect on how beautifully tangled our lives had become. Each layer, each moment of honesty, formed an intricate tapestry of connection woven from love, understanding, and acceptance. In those peaceful reflections, intertwined with laughter and the echo of a new understanding, I found the kind of solace I hadn't known I was searching for. The realization dawned upon me as I drifted to sleep that maybe life's imperfections and challenges could incite the most profound connections, and it was those very bonds I'd built with my sister that reminded me of the remarkable tapestry of life we all share, even, and perhaps especially, when we don't fully understand each other. The morning sun broke through the curtains with a gentle glow, nudging me awake to another day intertwined with the realities of sisterhood and the enigmatic world of parenthood. As I rose from my slumber, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, beckoning me towards the kitchen where Emma busied herself, cradling Milo with one arm while stirring a pot of oatmeal with the other. The sight was almost cinematic, a perfect blend of chaos and tenderness that defined her new life. I couldn't help but smile, but a familiar twinge of guilt laced my thoughts. The previous day's confrontation hung in the air like an uncomfortable breeze, and I knew we hadn't fully wrapped up our discussion about what it meant to be a mother in her eyes versus mine. Over breakfast, our conversation flowed effortlessly at first, light-hearted remarks exchanged amid spoonfuls of oatmeal and the sporadic gurgle of Milo. But as Emma shared her latest parenting triumphs and trials, I could feel the unsaid words lingering between us, creating an important, yet unspoken, tension. Just as the atmosphere turned fragile, I watched her face transform, suddenly reflecting the worry I had seen only moments before in her laughter. "Do you really believe Milo isn't a real baby?" she asked, her voice hanging between vulnerability and defiance. My heart sank. I had never intended to undermine her journey, but the truth I spoke felt so distant from the love she poured into him. "It's not that he isn't real," I stammered, trying to tread carefully. "It's more about how we perceive these relationships. Your love for him is immeasurable, but I worry about how these expectations affect you." Her brow furrowed, and I could see the storm of emotions brewing just behind her eyes. "You think I'm playing house?" she hissed, each word a sharp shard. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, my own heart racing as fear knotted my stomach. It was difficult to see my sister hurt, and the distance between our perspectives only widened in that moment. "No, Emma, that's not what I meant at all." My voice softened, the urgency to mend the rift propelling me forward. "I want to celebrate your bond. I see how much you love him, but I also want to make sure you don't find yourself lost in this identity." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "How can I be lost when I spent years dreaming of moments like these? How can you think I wouldn't know what's real?" There it was, the core of her pain, the feeling of not being understood, not being seen in the half-light of doubt I had cast over her life. I felt a wave of emotion crash over me as I searched for the right words to bridge the chasm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling the sincerity of my apology wash over my words. "I'm afraid of what happens when the novelty fades and how it might feel to confront the reality of parenting. I just want to make sure you're okay." Her silence spoke volumes, a mixture of resentment, understanding, and perhaps a trace of compassion for my misplaced fear. We remained suspended in that moment until slowly, like the dawn creeping through the night, she exhaled deeply. "I appreciate your concern, but I wish you could trust me more. I'm deep in this, and it's beautiful, even if it's messy." Those words etched themselves on my heart, each syllable a reminder of the need for trust amidst uncertainty. With that, the tension began melting away as if the morning sunlight was burning through our darkness. We spent the rest of the day navigating shared moments together, plays with Milo transforming into laughter-filled bursts of joy, the kind only siblings can ignite in each other. As the hours passed, with each silly face made and every coup exchanged, I let go of the need to be right and allowed space for Emma to lead. When evening fell, and the amber dusk settled lazily outside the windows, we curled onto the couch, each cradling Milo, their hearts synchronized in a new rhythm of understanding. I held my breath as she began to sing softly, tapping into that innate bond that tied us together, unearthing things that transcended mere words. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, reassuring me that the journey we were on was uniquely ours, regardless of how we perceived it. I realized that love exists in its many forms, and in order to embrace that love, we didn't have to understand every facet of it, we simply had to accept it. That night, as I drifted into sleep once more, I felt a deep sense of peace, a profound connection to my sister fortified by our shared vulnerabilities. The beauty of our imperfect lives felt both heavy and light, reminding me that we carry each other as we navigate through the complexities of love and identity. My heart swelled at the thought of the many future moments we would continue to craft together against the backdrop of life's ever-changing tapestry. Although I hadn't found all the answers, I took comfort in knowing that I was never alone on this journey, and perhaps that was what mattered most. I've always prided myself on being a generous person, but the last few months have turned that belief on its head, and now, I find myself questioning my own values. My girlfriend, Rachel, and I had been together for just over a year when she broached the subject of her kids needing cars. Now, let me clarify, Rachel has 2 children from a previous marriage, Jenna, who is 15, and Max, who is 13. From the moment I met them, I felt an instant bond. Jenna had this fierce spirit, often caught between her childhood and looming adulthood, while Max was a whirlwind of energy, always looking to make people laugh. Sharing time with them was pure joy. Yet, as Rachel's kids got older, the conversations inevitably shifted to the need for independence. They wanted their own rides to school, friends' houses, and extracurricular activities. It was an ordinary Thursday when Rachel casually said, "You know, I've been thinking the kids really need cars to be more independent." Wouldn't it be great if we could pick something up for them? At first, I chuckled, thinking she was joking. Surely, she didn't expect me to dive into a discussion about buying 2 cars just like that. But when I saw the look on her face, half serious, half hopeful, I realized this was no lighthearted suggestion. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach as I recalled my own struggles. I was still paying off student loans and saving to start a life of my own. I hesitated, my mind racing through various possibilities, trying to balance my own financial responsibility with the desire to support Rachel and her family. The conversation became heated, but I remained calm. Rachel, I love your kids, but I can't afford to buy them cars. It's just not realistic for me, I explained, choosing my words with care. She seemed taken aback, disappointment settling in her eyes. I thought we were in this together, she said softly, and I felt an unwelcome sting of guilt. It wasn't just the idea of cars, it was the unspoken tension between a partner who wanted to share burdens and a guy who was barely keeping his head above water. Over the following weeks, the tension lingered. I noticed subtle changes in Rachel's demeanor. She became quieter, often lost in thought. On one occasion, while driving back from a family dinner, Jenna asked casually if I was going to buy them cars. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, not wanting to disappoint her but also knowing how strained my finances were. It's complicated, Jenna, I replied, hoping to deflect. The laughter we used to share felt overshadowed by unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. Around this time, I took a hard look at myself and the relationship. I adored Rachel, and these kids meant the world to me, but it seemed I was inadvertently stepping into roles I wasn't ready for. I loved that Rachel envisioned a future where we united our families, but I had to be cautious about my own needs too. I chose to clear the air. Rachel, I said one evening, taking her hand. I care about you and your kids, but I also have to think about my financial goals. I'm not saying I won't help out in other ways, like giving rides or supporting them, but I can't commit to buying them cars. As I confessed my frustrations, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel listened quietly, her expression shifting from disbelief to understanding. I get it, she said finally, her voice softening. Sometimes I forget you're still figuring things out for yourself. I could sense the relief in her voice when we turned the corner, leaving anger and disappointment behind. From that point forward, our relationship evolved. I started finding ways to help Jenna and Max without putting myself in financial jeopardy. We worked on small projects together, and I even taught them how to save up for things they wanted. Months later, I received a message from Rachel that made my heart swell. The kids are working on their savings for cars. I think they've adopted your advice, she wrote, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of them taking initiative. As we sat together that night, reminiscing over our journey, it became clear that we had come a long way. Though my situation hadn't changed much financially, I was at peace knowing we had built a stronger bond through honesty and support. Reflecting on it all, I found comfort in the notion that relationships aren't about merely giving, they're about growing together through adversity. I had feared being seen as selfish, but in the end, what transpired reaffirmed a truth: it's important to recognize one's own limits and communicate openly. I was still part of their lives, just in a different role. And as I fell asleep that night, I felt grateful for the love we had cultivated amid uncertainty, looking forward to all the moments yet to come. Update: a few weeks later, Rachel and I sat down with Jenna and Max to discuss plans for their first car. Instead of just handing them cash, we organized a small family project, painting and refurbishing an old car Rachel's parents had. The kids were ecstatic and learned invaluable skills throughout the process. Watching them work on something they could own ignited a sense of pride in them, but more importantly, it strengthened our bond as a family. In the end, it was about much more than just the cars. It was a lesson in responsibility, independence, and support that we would all carry forward. As the days turned into weeks, our little project blossomed into something more than just a car refurbishment. It became a way for Jenna and Max to understand the value of hard work and teamwork, lessons that would follow them into adulthood. The garage was filled with a blend of laughter and the occasional argument over color choices, tools, and who was in charge of what task. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, feeling like a part of something bigger as I watched Rachel cheer them on, wiping her hands on an old rag and beaming with pride. One Saturday, I suggested that we decorate the trunk with positive affirmations. Each kid could choose a quote that inspired them. Jenna picked "Believe in yourself," while Max, still a bit of a jokester, went with "I fixed it, so I own it." Rachel and I scrambled to find some old paint and brushes, and soon the trunk of the car emblazoned with their chosen words became a family masterpiece. The act of creating something that was truly theirs, a canvas on wheels, made Jenna and Max light up in ways that store-bought gifts never could. I remember one afternoon, after splashing paint around and making ridiculous faces while trying to channel my inner artist, Jenna turned to me with her bright blue eyes shining. "Will you help us do this again someday?" she asked, her voice earnest. I nodded, caught up in the moment. "Absolutely. This can be the first of many projects. We'll build cars, tree houses, or even go-karts, whatever you can think of." The commitment struck me as I spoke, the weight of my words settled in my chest, but it also felt electric, like I was weaving threads into our growing fabric of family. As the weeks continued to pass, we worked diligently, putting in time every weekend, replacing parts, and learning about the engine. I took on the heavier, more technical parts while Rachel guided the kids through the finer points of sanding and painting. Each task was a chance for Jenna and Max to ask questions, and for us to share stories of our own youthful follies, like the time I managed to get my first car stuck in a mud pit because I thought four-wheel drive meant you could drive anywhere. One evening, while we cleaned up after a particularly messy painting session, I was surprised to see a glimmer of uncertainty appear in Jenna's eyes. She had always been the more confident of the two, but tonight, something was off. "Are we doing it wrong?" she muttered, glancing at the splatters of paint that dotted the ground, some bold strokes that had landed on her shirt. It struck me then just how important this whole experience was to her. If the car didn't turn out perfect, would that mean we had failed some unspoken test? I knelt down beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "What do you think?" I asked gently. "Does it feel like we're working together? Are you having fun?" She frowned for a moment, staring at the paint on her shirt and considering. "Yeah, but the car needs to look perfect." "Jenna," I said softly, "life isn't about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and having fun along the way." I watched as the words sank in, her expression slowly shifting toward relief and understanding, like the clouds lifting after a storm. Finally, the day came when we would unveil the refurbished car. We had all worked tirelessly, and the anticipation electrified the air as we gathered in the driveway for the big reveal. The sun shone down, catching the bright colors that adorned the car's surface in a way that made it look almost magical. Rachel stood beside me, her hand clasped in mine, her eyes glistening with excitement. Jenna and Max stood in front of the vehicle, their faces a mixture of disbelief and sheer joy, and as they reached out to touch their creation, I felt a surge of pride that ran deeper than I expected. Jenna joined Max in jumping up and down, squealing with happiness, and Rachel and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation of what we had built together, not just in terms of the car but within our family unit. I knew this was a moment they would remember, a fragment of time marked by laughter, creativity, and the unwavering bond we shared. Later, as we took turns behind the wheel on a quiet street, what struck me wasn't just the shiny paint or the engine purring, it was the way Jenna and Max discussed their plans for their driving future, each word a reflection of their blossoming maturity and sense of responsibility. I couldn't help but smile, thinking back to the conflict I had initially faced regarding whether or not I should buy them cars. The struggle had been real, but what we gained was immeasurable. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me, a warmth that spread from my chest to my fingertips. In teaching them the value of ownership and effort, I found that I was learning alongside them. Suddenly, our pastime projections morphed into a bonding experience, a way for Rachel and I to not only build cars but to build a family, brick by cherished brick. A week later, I received a message from an old coworker who wanted to update me about a job opening. The idea of returning to work jostled around in my brain, but I barely thought about it. Something deeper was stirring within me. The realization that I didn't need a high-paying job to feel fulfilled came to me like a whisper. I had discovered a different way to be present, engaged, and genuinely happy. Although our yard was filled with laughter from our car projects, I had also conjured an understanding that family was not just defined by blood, but by the memories we created together. Several months later, as our car adventures continued to unfold, Jenna and Max decided they wanted to do something special for Rachel and me. One afternoon, they surprised us with a picnic in the park, complete with sandwiches and homemade cookies that had some very creative, but slightly chaotic icing. We laughed as they took charge of the basket, and as we settled down beneath a tree, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As I watched the kids run around, their laughter a melody of joy, I realized that I would never trade these moments for material things. I might not have given them cars without conditions at first, but I had given them the tools to navigate life more effectively, which would prove to be far more valuable in the long run. Reflecting on everything, I realized that though my initial hesitation stemmed from wanting to be a responsible adult rather than a flashy type, it had led to something far more profound, and although I would probably always be the one saying, "Let's paint the trunk," I had also become the dad who could tell a joke, share genuine pieces of wisdom, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, I would hear Jenna and Max reminiscing about our adventures, and I couldn't help but feel that we were building not just a family of the future but a legacy, one filled not just with cars but with the cherished stories of our lives. As the days passed, our weekends became filled with laughter, paint splatters, and the smell of motor oil, a unique blend of chaos and joy that transformed our garage into a makeshift workshop and a haven for memories. Rachel would often send me gentle nudges of encouragement as I attempted to wield a wrench while Jenna and Max handled the power tools with surprising finesse. Each time they'd succeed in fastening a bolt or sanding down a rough edge, their smiles would widen, the joy resonating in their eyes as if they'd just conquered a mountain. These moments were powerful reminders of how quickly they were growing up, and each project fueled my desire to be more present and supportive in their lives. One evening, as dusk began to settle in, we found ourselves sprawled out on an old blanket we'd tossed in the trunk while we waited for paint to dry. The kids shared their dreams. Jenna wanted to travel the world and write stories of her adventures, while Max, always the jokester, mused about becoming a famous comedian. As I listened, I realized that this experience was about more than just cars. It was forging a foundation for their ambitions and aspirations. Weeks later, the old car began to transform. It was no longer just a rusted frame. It became a vibrant representation of teamwork, laughter, and shared sweat. We painted it in bold blues and cheerful yellows, mixing colors as if each swirl of paint was a thread in the tapestry of our newly formed family. Friends and neighbors stopped by, often asking if they could lend a hand, turning our small project into a community affair. One Saturday afternoon, while the kids and I painted the hood, Rachel appeared with freshly baked cookies, and her eyes sparkled with pride as she watched us. I felt a warmth in my chest knowing that I was no longer just a boyfriend to her. I had evolved into a partner and a father figure, nurturing the lives around me with kindness, patience, and a whole lot of love. When the project finally reached completion, the sense of accomplishment was palpable. The day we unveiled the finished car was nothing short of magical. Jenna and Max jumped up and down, their faces lit with astonished delight as we took a family picture beside the newly restored vehicle. However, with this joy came an underlying anxiety rooted in my mind. Would they expect the same kind of effort and commitment forever? What if life became too busy, or what if the bond we had nurtured began to unravel? I discussed these uncertainties with Rachel one quiet evening when the kids were snugly tucked in. We illuminated the room with soft light, a warm cup of tea in hand, and she shared a reassuring sentiment. "It's normal to worry," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "But remember, it's not about the cars or the crafts. It's about creating a space where they feel valued and supported, whether it's with paintbrushes or just by listening to their hopes. They'll remember the love, not just the projects." Her words resonated deep within me, and I realized she was right. These kids, Jenna and Max, were resilient and adaptive, just as life would need them to be. My role wasn't to guarantee a perfect scenario constantly but rather to be their constant support through life's uncertainties. As days turned to months, I witnessed their confidence blossom, not just in their abilities with mechanics but also in their schoolwork and friendships. They naturally began taking leadership roles among their classmates, eagerly engaging in school projects. Each time they tackled a new challenge, I felt a surge of pride that they might carry the values we cultivated through our weekend car projects into the rest of their lives, providing a sense of direction only strengthened by the love we built together. Reflecting on this journey, I found clarity in accepting my title as dad in their lives, embracing the role with open arms. As winter approached, and car maintenance became less frequent, we shifted our focus to indoor projects. Jigsaw puzzles and game nights filled the house with energy. The old car stood proudly outside, an emblem of our collective achievements and the dawning of a familial bond that felt everlasting. I often pondered the future but found comfort in knowing that our legacy would consist of more than material objects. It would be woven with the stories of resilience, compassion, and unwavering support that would carry us through any trials that lay ahead. Update: fast forward several years, and the old car became a treasured memento. Jenna and Max took it to prom with their friends, painted stars on the roof, and filled it with memories I knew would last them a lifetime. And as Rachel and I watched them drive off into the night, her hands securely clasped in mine, I felt overwhelming gratitude for every moment, good and bad, that had brought us here, a beautifully imperfect family, ready to face the world together, one adventure at a time. I never imagined my life could pivot so dramatically over something as mundane as a locked door, but here I am, recounting the events of that fateful evening with a sense of incredulity that still lingers. My name is Alex, an ordinary 30-something guy with a desk job and a comfortable little home nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I've always prided myself on being a conscientious husband, but like everyone else, I have my moments of negligence, and perhaps it was a combination of those moments that set this all in motion. It was a Thursday night, typical in every way, until I caught a glimpse of my wife, Laura, standing by the front door, her expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief, the kind that made my chest tighten in an instant. She was holding the doorknob, twisting it back and forth while I was half awake from a cozy couch nap, remnants of my evening routine still fresh in my mind, the warm glow of the TV, a snack bowl emptied, and the soft hum of the world outside. Laura asked me, with a sting of disappointment, if I had checked the lock after she'd gone to bed, and as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I realized I had utterly spaced on that detail, again. I shrugged it off at first, making casual remarks about how I trust our neighborhood and how we had lived there for years without incident. But in the back of my mind, I felt a creeping unease as I watched her react, her brow furrowed as she responded, "It's not about trusting the neighborhood, Alex. It's about being safe." A part of me wanted to laugh it away, to dismiss her concerns as overreactions like I once did during our years together, but as she continued to express her frustration, I felt a knot forming in my stomach, linking back to my own lack of accountability. Was I really that oblivious? It became clear that this situation was a metaphorical lock waiting to be clicked open, revealing deeper issues that may have long since festered beneath our shared surface. Days passed, and the conversation wafted in and out of my mind, my interactions with Laura feeling increasingly stifled like the air on a humid summer day. I'd watch her move through the house, her movement subtle yet heavy with a sense of grounded concern, the way a cloud hangs low and suspenseful, threatening rain. I noticed the little things, the way she double-checked the locks on the windows during the day, her growing habit of closing the blinds earlier than usual, her hesitance to walk to the mailbox alone. The peaceful rhythms of our life together felt interrupted as I tried to ignore the gnawing sensation at the back of my mind. The evening we normally spent side by side on the couch morphed into quiet, fragmented moments filled with awkward silences. It all came to a head one night when I returned home later than usual after meeting some friends for dinner. There she stood in the living room, awaiting my arrival like a lighthouse beacon cutting through the fog, arms crossed with a stern look on her face that I'd never seen aimed directly at me. I opened my mouth to greet her, but the words caught in my throat. I could sense it was more than just the locked door. "Did you even check the door?" Her voice was steady but tinged with a puncturing edge that stung more than I cared to admit. I hesitated, the silence stretching into a chasm. "No, I didn't," I finally admitted, the echo of those words reverberating through the room like a confession made under duress. "I just assumed you had it." It felt pathetic, my own excuse evaporating into the atmosphere. My stomach twisted again, I could see pain flickering through her eyes, an emotion beyond mere frustration, a sense of betrayal, of being let down by me, the one person she should be able to count on. Suddenly, it struck me, it wasn't just about the door, it was about trust, about dependence, about the fragile threads that held together our relationship. I realized how much she leaned on me, expected me to be her rock, and I had neglected even the simplest thread keeping our safety intact. As we sat on the couch that night, the air thick with unspoken words and fragile hopes, I squeezed her hand and spoke softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was being rational, but I wasn't being responsible. I promised to do better, to pay attention, to make you feel safe, not just when it's convenient for me." She responded by tracing her fingers along my palm, the tension easing as the minutes passed. The silence transformed from oppressive to contemplative, and we found ourselves deep in conversation, navigating our fears, our trust, and the small yet pressing details of our shared lives. As the moonlight spilled through the window, I understood that the lock was just a symptom of a deeper issue, my unpredictability and her need for assurance. Weeks later, our routines began to shift. I made it a point to verify every lock, not just for Laura, but as a symbol of my commitment to being present and responsible. The atmosphere in our home brightened, she smiled more, and we dove into rebuilding that connective thread, one soft conversation, one warm touch at a time. Reflection filled those quiet moments. We'd sit together on the couch, and as she leaned against me, I felt a new kind of peace emerging from our shared vulnerability. And so, in the spirit of Reddit tradition and as a reflection of this journey, I find it important to add this update. The evening I thought we were heading toward a rift transformed instead into an awakening. It wasn't just about the door or even the act of locking it. It became a way to openly articulate our needs, desires, and fears. I learned that perhaps it wasn't an AITA situation at all. Perhaps, instead, it was AITA, am I trying to learn? Because in that small, seemingly trivial episode, I discovered something profound about love, trust, and the importance of the little things in creating a safe harbor we could always come home to. The door has never been left unlocked. Again, and neither have our hearts. As the weeks rolled into months following our profound conversation about the door, I found myself reflecting on the subtle transformations in our relationship. It became a game of sorts, where each night, as I prepared to settle into bed, I would gently remind Lucy to double-check the lock, teasing her playfully about my newfound security obsession. I could feel the fortress we were building, not merely around our home but within each other, grow stronger and stronger. It was surprising how such a simple act could blossom into moments filled with tenderness and laughter, a little more anticipation before sleep took us. We began establishing new rituals, little habits that weren't mandated by duty but born out of a desire to nurture our partnership. Each evening concluded with us sharing a cup of tea on the porch, watching the day melt into night, with the faint sounds of crickets filling the air, a gentle reminder that life outside continued in a rhythm we were beginning to appreciate together. I started to look at our relationship with a new lens, where open communication became our foundation, and vulnerability, once a source of anxiety, transformed into our shared strength. I cherished those confiding moments with Lucy, preparing dinner together and laughing over burnt bread, the usual small talk evolving into deeper discussions about our hopes for the future. Conversations flowed like sacred threads binding us closer, so much so that I almost forgot what it felt like to walk that thin line of misunderstanding that we had been teetering on prior. It amazed me how our vulnerabilities morphed into stepping stones, carving pathways to rediscover the intricacies of each other's souls, learning, once again, what made us who we were. There were times, of course, where we stumbled. There were disagreements around financial decisions or the occasional miscommunication that prompted a surge of frustration, but even then, instead of retreating into silent resentments, we breathed, discussed, and gently nudged each other toward a healthier understanding. I realized that those moments are just as essential as the laughter-filled ones, they rounded us out. However, the true test of this new dynamic came on a chilly autumn night. The air bit fiercely against our cheeks, and the neighbors' laughter echoed through the street, reminding me of the warmth radiating from our home. Lucy and I were cozied up on the couch, engrossed in a movie, when suddenly an urgent knocking interrupted the cozy ambience. My heart raced. Was it a stranger? A lost traveler? That familiar feeling of anxiety tugged at my chest as I glanced at Lucy, who only nodded, encouraging me to check the door. It felt as if time had slowed. I walked to the front door, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, feeling every heartbeat pulsing in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I was met with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, shivering and teary-eyed. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Hey there, are you all right?" Her face was lost in shadows, but I could make out the tremor of her chin and the way she rubbed her arms together, as if trying to generate warmth. I got lost. Can I call my dad? He's just around the corner." My mind spun. Here I was, in our safe bubble, our haven, facing a potential crisis. A moment of fear tangled with empathy bubbled inside me. It was a test of everything we had learned, our commitment to openness, to addressing fears head-on. "Of course, sweetie, come in," I said, opening the door wider and motioning for her to step inside. As the warmth enveloped her, she glanced back at the darkened street, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I knew that this small act could either shield her further from threats or potentially lead to something more dangerous. Lucy joined us, her nurturing presence illuminating the moment, and we quickly settled into a space of safety and comfort. I reached for my phone, handed it to the girl, and patted her on the shoulder. "Just dial the number you remember. We're right here with you." The girl's hands shook as she dialed, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to her father. She relaxed slightly upon hearing him say he was on the way, and when she hung up the phone, her relief washed over me, filling the room with a profound quiet that seemed to hold stories of fear and safety in equal measure. When her dad finally arrived, our home transformed again, this time into a sanctuary, a temporary refuge. The girl rushed into her father's arms, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude that we were able to offer even this tiny comfort amidst her disarray. After exchanging pleasantries and ensuring she was safe, the father made it clear how invaluable our kindness was, lighting a small flame of warmth within me. After they left, as Lucy and I settled back down on the couch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything in our life together. It suddenly struck me that it wasn't merely about locking the door, it was about being open to the world outside, understanding that the safety and love we built weren't just for ourselves but could spill over into interactions that mattered with everyone around us. The door, once just an entryway to our home, had morphed into a symbol of our commitment to compassion and understanding, not just for each other but for anyone who crossed our threshold. I turned to Lucy, and we exchanged a smile filled with warmth and an unspoken promise that we would always remain open, vulnerable but secure, cautious yet loving, a true masterpiece of coexistence. And in those moments of quiet reflection, surrounded by the fading light of the evening, I finally felt the weight of the world lift just a little, reminding me that love doesn't simply build walls, rather, it constructs bridges that lead us back to humanity, again and again, one gentle reminder, one locked door, at a time. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across our cozy living room, I could feel the gentle hum of evening settling in, the kind that wraps you in a cocoon of comfort. Lucy had lit a few candles, their soft glow flickering in harmony with the settling tranquility of the night. It was a small ritual we had embraced, a moment of unwinding where the chaos of the day seemed to melt away. The warmth of her presence reminded me that we had crafted a safe space together, not just through the physical act of locking the door, but through the emotional openness we had nurtured in our relationship. Pacing softly, I felt grateful for this revelation, how something as simple as a door could serve as a metaphor for our willingness to safeguard one another's vulnerabilities. "Remember that night?" Lucy asked, her voice laced with a gentle nostalgia as she curled up on the couch, her eyes sparkling with memories. "The one where we both brainstormed a list of our fears?" She chuckled lightly, and I joined in, recalling a time when our insecurities seemed larger than life. We had laughed as we shared everything from mundane anxieties about work to deeper concerns about our relationship. That honest exchange had unknowingly paved the way for our newfound understanding of what it meant to connect, truly connect, beyond surface-level conversations. "Yeah," I replied, settling in beside her and draping an arm around her shoulders. "It's amazing how vulnerability can turn into strength if we let it." The moment felt precious, the world outside blurring into insignificance as we cocooned ourselves in this intimate bubble of safety. We began to share not just our fears, but our dreams, each whisper more soothing than the last, forming a tapestry of hopes that we would nurture together. I felt a rush of contentment, realizing that each lock I checked, each door I secured, was a commitment, an act of love that transcended fear and doubt. As the bits and pieces of our evening unfolded, conversations sparked like fireworks, our discourse ranging from future vacations we dreamed about to our desire to bring a pet into our home. Lucy was still talking about getting a dog, something I had initially hesitated over, wary of the added responsibility, but the way she spoke, her eyes lighting up at the thought, began to chip away at my resistance. A dog would be more than just an addition to our lives, it would be a shared experience, a reminder of how love could flourish in the little moments, from morning walks to lazy afternoons spent on the couch. With every word exchanged, I felt the door we had just locked moments before transform into one that swung wide open, inviting in a rush of warmth. As the candles flickered gently, casting playful shadows on the walls, I could see what lay ahead of us, a future painted in shades of laughter, compassion, and unwavering support. It was empowering to realize that we weren't just locking away our fears, we were also sealing in our joys, ensuring that nothing could breach the sanctuary we were building together. In time, as the evening wore on and the moon cast a silver glow through our window, I took a moment to breathe deeply and internalize the warmth of this connection we were nurturing. The world outside felt distant, almost irrelevant, as I realized that our relationship had morphed from merely coexisting to truly living, a shared journey where each step was marked by intention and understanding. "Have you ever thought about how locking the door is kind of a ritual?" I mused aloud, breaking the comfortable silence that had enveloped us like a soft blanket. Lucy nodded, her dark hair catching a glimmer of candlelight. "It's the first step we take in closing out the outside world," she said thoughtfully, "but it also makes space for us to just be, here, in our little world. It's our way of saying, this is our time. We matter." "Yes," I replied, feeling a swell of pride and love. It wasn't just about locking the door, it was about what it symbolized, the commitment to honor our space and each other. The balancing of boundaries and openness that allowed for growth without losing our individuality. I couldn't help but smile, envisioning the dog we might someday share. Next door might be the kids, or the noise of the world, but in this moment, it's just us. As the last flicker of the candles dimmed, I felt a deep reassurance envelope me, a tender acknowledgement that our bond was evolving in ways that were once unimaginable. I snuggled closer to Lucy, feeling the warmth radiating from her, a beacon in the cool night. The locked door wasn't just a safeguard, it was a promise we had made to each other, a vow to always return to the safe harbor we had created. And so, as I closed my eyes and allowed sleep to wash over me, I found solace in the laughter that echoed through the evening and the new dreams we would embrace upon waking. A door locked, yet ajar with possibility, standing as a testament to our journey. And with that, I drifted into sleep, content, loved, and forever learning.